My name is Lena Monroe. My sister didn't just mock me during a job interview, she made sure I never got the job. She laughed when they folded my resume in half and dropped it in the trash in front of a full conference room. She called me a side quest, told the panel I was unqualified, then smiled as they skipped over me like I was invisible. But what she didn't know was this. The man she couldn't control, the one who stepped into the room moments later, was my fiancé. And when he asked if I was okay, the silence in that room shattered like glass. That was the day I stopped asking for a seat. I built the whole damn table. Have you ever had someone in your own family try to erase you? Like you were nothing. What would you do if your own sister turned your ambition into a joke and the world clapped with her? Would you walk away? Or would you walk back in and make them all see what they tried so hard? Not to let me know in the comments. And if you've ever rebuilt yourself from nothing, this story is for you. Stay with me. The first time I realized my sister Celeste didn't see me as her equal wasn't at that interview. It was a decade earlier when she read my private journal out loud in front of her friends because she was bored. We grew up in the same house, shared the same room, but the world treated us very differently. She was the golden child, the girl with the perfect GPA, the flawless smile, the one Dad introduced as his future CEO. And me, I was the creative one, the soft-hearted one, the girl who loved computers but didn't look the part. Even Mom used to say Lena's smart in her own way. I learned early on that in her own way meant not enough to be taken seriously. While Celeste climbed the corporate ladder, I worked my way through college doing freelance system design, juggling coffee shop shifts and code audits, learning the hard way how to fix what other people broke. My projects were real scaling data for small nonprofits, streamlining back-end systems for health tech startups. But in family dinners, none of that mattered. Dad would raise a glass to Celeste's newest promotion, then glance at me and say, "Lena's freelancing now. That builds resilience, right?" The worst part, I didn't even resent them for it. Not back then, I just kept working, kept building, hoping that one day they'd notice, that she would notice, that maybe, just maybe, Celeste would be proud of me. But that's not how Celeste works. She doesn't compete. She eliminates. I found that out the day I shared a new data integration framework with her, something I'd spent months refining. She listened with her usual flawless smile, nodded, even asked smart questions, I thought, for once we were bonding. A week later, her firm pitched that exact framework to a high-profile client. Word for word, same flow, same keywords. She never lied. That was her genius. When I asked, she just shrugged and said I didn't say it was mine. People just assumed. I mean, if they connect the dots, that's on them. I lost that contract. She got a raise, but I still didn't stop. Because somewhere deep down, I kept believing that if I worked harder, if I was good enough, anyone would see past the shadow I was standing in. So when I saw the job listing at Storm CP, I hesitated. Not because I didn't think I could do it, but because I knew Celeste worked there. She'd never mentioned it directly, but I'd seen the company name in her emails. Still, I needed to try. I wanted a place that wasn't just another side gig, something with stability, a real future. I spent a week tailoring my resume, building a full case study from scratch. The night before the interview, I stayed up rereading white papers and debugging a prototype tool I'd hoped to present during the technical round. I dressed modestly, but sharp black blazer, minimal makeup. The kind of look that says, I'm here to work. The Storm CP building was all glass and steel cold, gleaming and silent. As I stepped into the lobby, I caught my reflection in the wall. Scuffed shoes, eyes a little tired. But I stood tall. I had earned my place here. Or so I thought. Until the moment the door opened and Celeste walked in, wearing a navy silk blouse heels that echoed with confidence, and that same mug in her hand she always carried when she wanted to be seen. She looked right through me. No nod, no smile, no flicker of recognition. She took her place on the interview panel, like I was just another stranger. And in that moment, I knew this wouldn't be a fair game. But I stayed because I wasn't there to make her proud anymore. I was there to be seen finally on my own terms. The assistant offered coffee. Everyone in the room got a cup except me. Not because they ran out, because no one bothered. I could feel Celeste watching me over the rim of her mug, smirking. And then came the whisper. She leaned toward the woman next to her, Laura, I think, and said just loud enough for me to hear. She still dresses like she shops in college clearance bins. The chuckle that followed didn't need to be loud. It landed sharp, but I didn't react. Not a flinch. Not a blink. I stared at the fake wood grain of the conference table, felt my heart beat slow. I reminded myself of what I'd built of the late nights learning cloud compliance, while others slept of debugging systems, while scraping rent together of earning every single skill without a safety net. They started calling names for self-introductions. Celeste smiled at the polished candidates, took notes, nodded. But when my name was called, she didn't even look up. I stepped forward, placed my resume in front of her. She stared at it for maybe 2 seconds, then slid it to Greg, the executive on her left, like it was a flyer someone handed her on the street. Greg barely looked at it. Just set it aside, that was it. No questions, no welcome, no eye contact. I returned to my seat. The tick of the wall clock sounded louder than it should have. Someone coughed. A few heads turned, and behind me, I heard the words whispered again. She's here. I didn't think she was even in tech. Celeste laughed, not loudly. Just enough, the kind of laugh that says I win again. And still I didn't move because I'd lived through worse, and silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy. Then Greg leaned back in his chair, twirled a pen between his fingers, and said, "So, what makes you think you're ready for the big leagues?" The tone was dripping like he was talking to a child with big dreams and no clue. I opened my mouth, but Celeste cut in before I could speak. She reached across the table, snatched my resume again, opened her red pen, and began scribbling. I could see the ink bleeding through from where I sat. Wrong major. Wrong look, wrong fit. And then in thick capital letters across the bottom, unqualified. She slid it back toward me like she was handing over a test I'd failed in advance. Still, I stayed calm. I led an AI ethics redesign for 3 mid-tier platforms. I said, my voice even. Last year, I helped scale a predictive data model that cut processing time by 34%. Celeste didn't blink. Oh, she smiled, syrupy sweet, still chasing those little dream projects. Then she turned to the room while I was presenting at a London summit. She was still uploading resumes to Indeed. The laughter that followed was softer than humiliation usually sounds, but it was sharper than any scream. Even the assistant smirked. Greg chuckled. Well, he said, if she wants a shot, let's give her a real one. He snapped his fingers. A thick paper packet hit the table. Logic systems problem solving. 10 pages, 15 minutes. No calculator, no questions. My pulse quickened. Not from fear, from fury. But I picked up the pen and got to work. I didn't look up. Not once. Not when Celeste whispered again. Not when someone snorted 2 seats away. The questions twisted around on purpose, like they were designed not to measure intelligence, but to break confidence. I didn't care. I had built harder things. When I finished, I placed the packet in front of Greg. He didn't even pretend to read it. He tore it, deliberate page by page. Let the pieces fall into the trash beside him. Then he muttered, impressive penmanship. But we don't hire fiction writers. Someone behind me laughed. Soft, cruel. Celeste leaned in. You never learn when to quit, do you? I walked slowly to the trash and began picking up each piece one by one. Not to save the test, but to remember. To remember every time they dismissed me. Every time they laughed. Every time they chose to look away. This wasn't humiliation, it was fuel, and I wasn't done. Not even close. The sidewalk outside Storm CP felt colder than it should have. My fingers were still curled around the pieces of the torn test edges, frayed like every time I'd tried to fit into spaces that were never meant for me. I walked. Not toward home. Just away, my phone buzzed. A message from Coulter. How did it go? I stared at the screen, thumb hovering. I typed. Exactly how she wanted it to. Then paused. Deleted it. That was her version. Her story. Not mine. I typed one word instead. Fine. Because I refused to let Celeste narrate my life anymore, I ducked into a narrow cafe 2 blocks away. The barista barely glanced up. I ordered a coffee. I wouldn't drink just to justify sitting down. At the far corner by the window, I unfolded the shredded test pages, smoothing them out on the table, red ink bent corners. The word unqualified still faint at the bottom. I traced it with my thumb, not in sadness, in recognition. This wasn't the first time. 24 years old. My first full-time offer nearly in hand, I'd pitched a custom platform to a nonprofit accelerator. After weeks of back and forth, they told me they were moving forward with a different version of the concept. One presented by Celeste's firm, I had shared it with her. Over wine as sisters, she hadn't stolen it. She had simply not corrected anyone when they assumed it was hers. When I confronted her, she said, I didn't say it was mine. If people connect dots, that's on them. Dad laughed about it at dinner. To my visionary daughter Celeste, he toasted, and to Lena, still the kind one. Kind, that word stuck like a bruise under the skin. Kind was always code for non-threatening, for forgettable. I should have known the interview would be a setup. Celeste doesn't compete, she dominates. That's why she never acknowledged me. Because if she had, she would have had to admit I was there and that I had earned my seat. But this wasn't about her anymore. I reached for my bag, pulled out my phone again. One unread message from a small startup I'd been consulting for. I drafted a resignation last week, typed it at 2 a.m., telling myself it was time to stop clinging to side gigs and go all in. My finger hovered over the send button again, but this time I didn't click, I deleted the draft. Because I wasn't quitting today. Not because I was fearless, because I was done letting fear dress itself up as humility. I gathered the torn pages, slipped them back into the folder, and stood. As I stepped out, Midtown buzzed around me, honking cabs, someone shouting across the street, a child crying. Life moved on, and I did too. Back through the glass doors of Storm CP. The same receptionist blinked when she saw me. Miss Monroe. I need to speak to the panel again, I said. Buttoning my coat, she hesitated. They're in a closed session, I know, I said. That's why I'm here. There was something in my voice, something even I didn't recognize at first. Steele, she picked up the phone, didn't argue. 2 minutes later, I was in the elevator, alone, rising. The doors opened on floor 40, same carpet, same glass, same silence. I walked straight to the room they'd humiliated me in. Greg was there, half laughing through a story. Laura was scribbling something in her notebook. And Celeste, still perched like royalty, legs crossed, smile untouched. They turned as I walked in. Forgot your pride on the way out, Greg said. Not even hiding the mockery, Celeste didn't miss a beat. You never could let go, could you? I didn't respond. I walked to the table, pulled out the chair they hadn't offered me before, sat down, waited. Greg raised an eyebrow. Well, then, he said, if you're so eager, let's test that brain of yours, he gestured. A thick test packet hit the table. 10 pages, no calculator. 15 minutes timer on. I nodded once, took the pen, and began. This wasn't about proving anything to them. It was about proving something to myself, that I didn't need anyone's permission to belong. I finished with 1 minute to spare. Every question, no crossings out. Greg took it, flipped through, didn't smile, didn't speak. He just tore it in half and let it fall. I stayed seated. Hands in lap, eyes forward. Then I stood, walked to the trash, picked up every piece, not to prove a point, to remember. Because next time I faced someone like him, I'd remember exactly how cowards dress themselves in power. Celeste leaned down as I reached for the last page. She stepped on it with her heel, pinned it. Leaning close, she whispered, still crawling for approval. I looked up, and for the first time in years I smiled. The moment I left that room again, I didn't cry, I didn't spiral, I didn't even slow down, I just walked. Until the city noise blurred behind glass, and I stood in front of a bakery on Ridgewood Avenue watching the glow of its late-night lights spill onto the sidewalk like something sacred. But I wasn't there for sweetness, I was remembering. 2 nights earlier, family dinner. A gathering just to catch up, Dad had texted. Belmont House, white linens. A private room at the back, the kind Celeste always chose. I walked in last. They'd already ordered. I sat by a potted fern. Like an afterthought, Celeste arrived 20 minutes late, and everyone stood like she was royalty. I was on a call with Soul, she said, not even pretending to apologize. Time zones are a nightmare, Dad beamed. That's my girl. Still closing global deals while we eat. I smiled tightly, lifted my glass, swallowed the truth with the water. During dessert, she leaned in, voice silky smooth. You'll always be beneath me, darling. You know that, right? A camera flash went off. Mom called it a sister moment. And the photo, it showed me smiling, lips curled, eyes dead. But that smile, that lie was over now. I went back upstairs, not home. Back to Storm CP. The security guard blinked when he saw me. "I'm here for the open assessment round," I said, calm as stone. He didn't ask questions. He just picked up the phone. 2 minutes later, the elevator opened again. Same floor, same conference room, but everything had changed because I wasn't asking anymore. I was delivering. Greg raised his eyebrows. Laura whispered something. Celeste smirked back. "So soon?" she asked. Thought we'd made things clear. I didn't answer her. I placed a folder on the table, thin, precise, heavy with proof, my work, the actual record. "The results that weren't read because they didn't come in the package you preferred," Greg scoffed. "You're interrupting a closed." The door opened behind me, and the air shifted. It didn't just pause. It braced. Coulter Hayes stepped in like a gust of winter air. Quiet, sharp, impossible to ignore. Tailored black, no tie, no smile. Every panelist stood, even Celeste Coulter. She stammered. "I mean, Mr. Hayes." He didn't look at her. He looked at me. "Are you okay?" I nodded. He turned to the room. Voice calm, tone lethal. "Interesting," he said. "Some of you apparently know my fiancé very well." Greg cleared his throat. "If we had known she was qualified." "Qualified," Coulter interrupted, "or just human." He moved to the head of the table. "Open the folder I brought. This is Dina Monroe, freelance architect behind 3 of our internal platforms, co-author of our AI ethics framework in 2021. The very one this team white-labeled and still doesn't fully understand." Laura's face drained of color. Greg looked like he'd swallowed a stone. Coulter slid a photo across the table. "This is your Q4 metrics report. Her work. You used it. You benefited from it. You just didn't know who she was because she didn't announce herself the way Celeste does." He turned to me. "Would you like to add anything?" I nodded once. "I didn't come here for favors. I came because I believed I had value. Turns out I had more than that. I had proof. You just didn't bother to look." Celeste's mouth opened, but no sound came. Greg stammered something about informal processes. Laura tried to mention unconscious bias, but Coulter didn't let them wriggle out. "Then let's review the footage," he said, gesturing to the screen on the wall. No one objected. No one dared. The video began. My voice. My explanation. Greg's mockery. Celeste's red pen. Her whisper. "You'll always be beneath me," when the screen faded to black silence, landed like thunder. Even the board members on the video call didn't speak. Then the legal advisor did. "This isn't just poor judgment," he said. "This is a liability." And Celeste, she snapped. She planned this, she yelled. She manipulated everything. She just wanted this moment. I raised an eyebrow. Didn't speak. The silence rattled her more than anything I could have said. "I introduced you to him," she screamed. "I gave him to you." Coulter stepped forward, his voice cold. "So you admit you sabotaged her? Altered her HR file in 2019 because we found it." The audit log slid across the table. Her login, her notes. Not a cultural fit. Resistant to feedback. Unpredictable career-killing phrases. Buried. Celeste's voice dropped to a whisper. I was protecting the company. "She clings. She rides on others." "You're done," Coulter said quietly. Effective immediately. She was still trying to process it when she made one last move. Before security even reached the door, Celeste spun back around one last shot at control. "She's not innocent," she spat, reaching into her designer tote with a tremble. "Too slight to be humble, she's manipulative. Look at what she sent to a client." She slammed her phone onto the glass table. A screenshot lit the screen. An email allegedly from me calling a potential partner. A walking disaster in heels. My name, my email signature. Even the timestamp looked real. The panel gasped. Greg leaned forward like he'd just found a life raft. Laura's eyes flicked between me and Coulter, but I didn't flinch. Not this time. I calmly unzipped my bag and slid a thin black binder across the table. "This," I said, "is the internal server log from 48 hours ago. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The email was created from an IP address belonging to Celeste Monroe under a temporary admin login she requested last week to review hiring documents. That login was used to forge this message and send it to her personal device. The sender field was spoofed using outdated code from an old mailing plugin still active on Storm CP's internal sandbox. Silence, heavy, unmovable. The assistant who had once snickered at me now stared at the table. Greg looked like he wanted to melt through the floor. Laura closed her notebook entirely. Coulter's voice dropped. Even final forging internal credentials to defame another team member is not just unethical, it's criminal. Celeste stood frozen, all of her polish cracking at once. The perfect lipstick, the blown-out hair. None of it could hold together anymore. "You think you're better than me now," she hissed. "Just because he picked you," I looked her dead in the eyes. "No," I said, "I'm just done being beneath you." Security arrived, but they didn't need to touch her. She walked out stiff, jaw-tight heels echoing on the tile, and for the first time in years, she didn't look back. The moment the door closed, the room exhaled. No applause, no cheers, just that pure silence, the kind that tastes like justice. Coulter didn't even sit. "I move," he said, "that Dina Monroe be reinstated to her original consulting status this time. Full-time with project lead authority." No one objected. Every hand went up, even Greg's. Though he didn't look at me when he did it. The HR lead stood. "You're being offered lead strategy consultant effective immediately. Celeste Monroe's former office is yours." I turned the glass-encased corner suite. With the skyline view Celeste had once called it, the throne. I looked at it for 1 second, then shook my head. "No," I said softly. "I'd like a desk closer to the dev team, with the builders, not above them." They paused, then nodded. Coulter gave me a quiet smile, and for the first time it didn't feel like rescue. It felt like recognition. As I signed the papers, Laura, who hadn't looked at me all day, slid something folded across the table. A note, small, handwritten. "We're glad you're finally where you've always belonged." I didn't respond. Not out of pride, just peace. Because for the first time I didn't need applause. I didn't need forgiveness. I didn't even need validation. I had my name, I had the work, and I had the truth. Documented, signed, sealed, delivered. I walked out of that room without a single backward glance, and the torn resume still in my bag, rustled softly like a flag raised after a long war. Not to celebrate revenge, but survival. I wasn't just seen now, I was known. Later that week I returned to the office, this time, not as a candidate, not as someone begging to be taken seriously, but as lead. The development floor buzzed with quiet energy. People moved with purpose. There were no polished rehearsals here, only real builders and real work. My new office was smaller than Celeste's corner suite. No marble coffee table, no skyline view. Just a sunny window, a clean desk, and the scent of lemon-scented cleaner. A smell that reminded me of fresh starts. I opened the top drawer of my desk and gently placed the torn resume inside, the one she'd written unqualified across. Then I took a strip of tape, sealed the ripped center, and pinned it on the corkboard above my desk. Not as a scar, as a receipt. A receipt for every sleepless night, every insult I swallowed, every time I kept building in silence while they laughed. That paper no longer meant rejection, it meant I survived. I built anyway. Just as I was about to leave for lunch, someone bumped into me at the hallway corner. Her. The young woman from the waiting area, the one who clutched her resume like it was a shield. She looked startled. Then her face lit up. "They called me back," she said breathlessly, "for the dev role." "The one you told me not to give up on," I smiled, held her eyes. "You deserve it," I said, and I meant it. Not because she reminded me of me, but because no one should be made to shrink to fit into someone else's mold. Back at my desk, I picked up a napkin I had scribbled on years ago during a failed client pitch. I pinned it next to the resume, the words faded, but still there. No one sees the quiet builder until the building outlasts the storm. And maybe that's the truth. Sometimes the ones who try to silence you share your last name, but strength. Strength is not always loud. It's not in revenge. It's in the quiet choice to stop chasing their approval and start walking your own path. What would you do if the person who kept tearing you down was someone you once looked up to? Would you keep trying to prove your worth to them, or would you finally decide that their approval was never the prize? For years I thought being the quiet one meant I wasn't strong enough. But silence isn't weakness. It's space to grow, to learn, to rise. And when you finally stop asking for a seat at their table, you start building your own. If this story hit something in you, if you've ever been dismissed, looked over, or told you weren't enough, then hear me clearly. You are not too late, you are not too soft, and you don't need anyone's permission to take up space. So tell me, Have you ever walked away from someone you loved just to finally find yourself? If you were in Lena's shoes, what would you have done in that room? Comment your story below. Let me know where you're listening from. And if you've ever stood your ground, vote number 1 in the comments. If you're still finding your voice, vote heart 7. Don't forget to subscribe to Sophia's Revenge Stories for more powerful true stories every single day, because the truth behind family drama, it's never just drama, it's who you choose to become after.